Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Wednesday, November 27th. Hope everybody is having a great day so far. In today's show, we're going to start off with some breaking news. Of course, Daniel Jones, coming out of the Giants organization, officially signs with the Minnesota Vikings today. We'll also break down the College Football Playoff Committee's poll that came out last night. We'll talk about what I liked about it, what I didn't, as well as our NBA power rankings, some MLB free agency updates, and the rookie report from this week in the NFL. But before we get into any of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Wednesday, November 27th. Like I was saying, we're going to start off our show today here with a little bit of reactions from the college football playoff ranking. That came out, of course, every single Tuesday night. This poll was one of the more interesting ones to look at. Honestly, when I looked at it originally, I thought it was maybe the most incorrect, but the more I kind of sat, the more I kind of thought about it, I feel like they're getting closer and closer to the right answer, which I think is what you should be getting as time continues, right? There's been all of these calls for change on these playoff rankings for each of the last three versions. This is the fourth one that they've come out with, and honestly, when you go top to bottom, there's a couple of things that I would change. There's no doubt about it. But the idea behind most of it and the teams that are in there, I think in general, they have the right 12 teams in the playoffs. Now, you can get nitpicky and you can say a couple of spots should change the order, and we're going to do that. We're going to go through there. So let's start at the bottom, right? Let's start at the very bottom, and that's where we get a couple of Big 12 teams. Kansas State and Colorado. Both of those schools, I think, deserve to be ranked. As far as in the top 25, they don't really have a real shot unless they win the Big 12, which would make things a lot more interesting for the playoff scenario. Because right now, that Big 12 auto bid is the 12 seed in the college football playoffs, and they hold at number 16 in the nation with ASU. The Big 12 right now, well, it does have 5 schools in the top 25. Its highest ranked team is number 16, Arizona State University, right? You have 18 and 19, Iowa State and BYU, and then 24 and 25 with Kansas State and Colorado, right? Those are the 5 teams that you're looking at and you're saying, oh, they have at least any kind of shot of winning the Big 12. But when you really take a step back and you take a look at, hey, what are these teams doing? If Arizona State doesn't win the Big 12, which they're favored to do, they're the best team in the Big 12 for my money, there is a real shot that the Big 12 does not make the college football playoff this year. And the reason we say that is we're going to skip ahead just a little bit as we talk about ASU at number 16, but right behind them, it's Tulane at number 17. The committee is saying that, hey, we are going to value right now the Big 12 champion over the American champion if everything goes the way that it's favored to, if chaos ends, if all the chaos of this college football season goes down the drain and it's just what we expected for the rest of the way, it will be the Big 12 as that 5th conference champion. But the way they're saying this right now is Tulane is better than any other Big 12 school. So if Arizona State slips up, and I don't expect Tulane to, but if Tulane goes all the way, wins out like they're supposed to, and Arizona State slips up somewhere, we will see 2 group of 5 schools in the college football playoffs. And I've been talking about this as a possibility for a while. Tulane's been playing really good football recently, right? They've come through. The last time we saw them, they shut out Navy 45-0. That was a huge win for them. They are a lock to make the American champion, and we just saw Army, the team that they're going to play in the American championship, lose to Notre Dame pretty convincingly. Tulane has a real argument of being the best group of five school right there as Boise State continues to slip. We also have our third group of five school in here in UNLV, who will be taking on Boise State for the Mountain West Championship, and things get crazy if UNLV ends up winning that game, as it is a real possibility that UNLV beats Boise in a rematch here because, again, Boise State has just not been playing its best football right now. They have the best resume out of the group of five, but the way that it looks right now, it's becoming less and less of a pipe dream to have two group of five teams in there, and I think it would be so cool. I think it'd be so cool to have two group of five schools represented because, honestly, the gap between the top three group of five schools and some of these Power Four schools, it's not that big. It's not as big as it used to be, especially with rosters shrinking after this season, with NIL, with transfer portal. We see more and more these top group of five schools can compete with at least the mid-tier of the Power Four. It'll be interesting to see what happens when they go up against the top tier of the Power Four, which, don't get me wrong, they're not anywhere close to yet. But as far as these kind of middle tier teams, like an Arizona State, like a Iowa State, that's sandwiched in that makes a two-lane sandwich right there, I think there's a real shot that we get to see two group of five schools in the playoffs. And I for one, can't wait to see that possibility play out. Outside of that, as the playoff stands right now, we're going to skip ahead a little bit. Clemson is the first team out, and I do think that Clemson is way too highly ranked. I've talked about Clemson a lot this season. They obviously started off not too hot, getting blown out by Georgia in week 1. Then they went on a bit of a winning streak. But the thing is, during that winning streak, and it's tough to bring up resumes in college football. I'm not going to sit here and say that, resumes are the way that you go about it. But Clemson's resume does make a huge difference, right? Their best win this season is probably their win against Pitt. And Pitt is on a huge, huge downswing, right? They get absolutely trounced against the two good teams that they've played this season in Louisville and Georgia, of course, in week 1. Outside of that, when they're beating up on lesser competition, which again is a skill in and of itself, you beat the teams you're supposed to beat. There's a reason that they're up here. There's a reason they've only lost 2 games. There's a reason that they still have a chance in the ACC. But it is really underwhelming for me. Even that game against Pitt, they barely could get anything going. They had to rely on a last-second magic 50-yard run from Cade Klubnik to win that game. Their second best win against Virginia, their offense was so bad. It could not move the ball in the entire first half. Clemson at number 12 is way too high for me, and I don't think they should be that close to the playoffs. I do understand having them ranked. Again, winning is important. They win their games. They move up. But putting them at 12 ahead of a team like South Carolina and ASU, those two teams I definitely think should be ahead of Clemson. I don't think they're too far off on Clemson, but I definitely think they should be at least a couple of spots back, and I do think that South Carolina should be getting a little bit more respect. We talk about the disappointments of Alabama and Ole Miss last week, losing their 2 games that they needed to win, 2 games that almost would have solidified them in the college football playoffs, honestly, if they had just won out. Instead, they both take brutal losses on their schedule, and they are this close. They're this close to getting into the playoffs. Clemson is the first team out. Alabama is the second team out. South Carolina is behind both Alabama and Ole Miss. It's that 1, 2, 3 order we talk about. They're respecting the head-to-head there, but at this point, and I know it's important to respect head-to-head. I really do. I understand why they did it this way. But South Carolina is not losing their games that they're not supposed to lose. You take a look at the losses that South Carolina has sustained this season, right? South Carolina has lost 2. Of course, they lost to Alabama on a walk-off field goal, a game that they should have won, honestly. They lost to Ole Miss. Really good teams right there. Outside of that, a loss to LSU. That's 3 top-tier losses right there. Those 3 teams near the top of the SEC were all ranked in the top 10 at some point. These are teams that are really good. You take a look at those 3 losses and compare those 3 losses to the losses of an Ole Miss that has now lost to Florida, never been ranked this season. Kentucky, never been ranked this season. And on top of that, they do lose to LSU. That's a fine loss right there, right? But that's two losses that are really bad. Alabama's not much better. Of course, they have that loss to Vandy. They got ranked for a minute there. Oklahoma started the season ranked in the preseason, but once they started playing the SEC teams, they looked atrocious. I believe that win against Alabama was their first SEC win of the entire season. And their third loss of the season was to Tennessee. That's a strong loss. You have one strong loss in both of these teams, but South Carolina has three strong losses. And I'm not a huge believer in good losses, right? But when you're comparing these three teams specifically in a bubble, I know head to head, you have to respect that. But South Carolina has just frankly a better resume, and I would put South Carolina ahead of both of them right now. South Carolina is not losing the games they're not supposed to lose. They're winning the games they're supposed to win, and that's the most important things. These two programs, Alabama and Ole Miss, are not doing that, and I don't believe they should be that close to the playoffs. But that's just how it goes. South Carolina has a huge opportunity to take care of Clemson this rivalry week, and I think they will. I really do. I think South Carolina is playing like one of the hottest teams in all of college football, and maybe more chaos ensues. You never know. But I think with the way that Clemson has not been able to participate, that has not really been able to play against great schools, they should get absolutely blown out of the water against their in-state rival. But regardless of that, let's take a look at the actual playoff bracket. As I mentioned, ASU, Arizona State, is that 12 seed at number 16 overall in the rankings. They get that automatic bid, which means the four teams with a bye are Boise State for the second week in a row at 11. Miami at 6, they're going to be the 3 seed. Texas at 3, the 2 seed, and Oregon at 1, the 1 seed. That puts us overall with, again, Big Ten at the top. 3 of the top 5 teams, 3 of the top 4 teams are Big Ten. Indiana falls to number 10, which means there's 4 Big Ten teams in the college football playoffs right now, 3 SEC teams, 2 ACC teams, and of course, 1 from independents and the other 2 conferences. You now have, with this week, ACC getting an auto bid, getting not just an auto bid, but also an at-large bid, which is really cool to see. I love that they're giving respect to SMU. SMU, arguably the better team in the ACC right now. They have been much more consistent. That defense is much better than Miami's, which you can argue that Miami's offense is better. I think it is. But the ACC, you need... But with this college football playoffs, you're going to need a more consistent defense, which Miami just doesn't have. And I think SMU is probably the best team in the ACC right now. Besides that, I think they got the right teams in the playoffs, honestly. I think all 12 teams that are in the playoffs right now are the right ones. I don't love that Alabama is that close to the playoffs, but that's just how it's going to go with Alabama. But let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the brand new college football playoff poll. I think they did a really good job on this one, honestly. But let me know what you think. Well, we're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we turn our attention to the NFL. Daniel Jones, the big news of the day, has found a new place to be a quarterback. We'll talk about where he goes, where that benefits him, and his new team coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.